Okay, let's go ahead and get started, folks. Thank you for coming out tonight. This is our stakeholders meeting. I'm Joe Meinert, the City of Bowie Planning Director, and with us tonight is Jim Klein with Larger Klein and Associates and Kara Smith from the same firm. And tonight we're going to be looking at the draft Trails Master Plan update. And I think Jim's firm has done a really good job of compiling all of the input that they got from the workshops and the surveys and really listening to the feedback that they got and produced a really well put together document with lots of good information in it. And I think it's going to be the blueprint, as we said, the blueprint for moving forward in the future to improve the city's trails system. Tonight is a stakeholders meeting, and we do these typically for development projects. Whenever we have a plan that's going to go out through the hearing process, we like to have a meeting first with the residents to be able to explain what the plan is all about and then allow for the opportunity to ask questions and hopefully give answers. And so we're doing the same thing with this draft plan tonight, giving you an opportunity to hear some of the highlights of the plan. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at it on our website and continue to provide feedback to us. This is an opportunity for questions and answers. Mainly that's the purpose of the meeting. We like to try to keep it informal. There aren't that many people here, so I don't think we need to worry about someone dominating the discussion, but sometimes we have a full room of people, the same people want to keep talking, but we want to try to make sure everybody has a chance to participate. That's what really makes these meetings effective. And that way you'll become better educated about the product that's going to be going to the council. The City Council is going to hold their public hearing on this plan on September 3rd. We didn't want to rush into it, try to get it done before the summer. There's really no pressure to do that. So, and plus the council has got some packed agendas, as some of you know. So we moved it to September after the vacation season is over, and we would encourage you to come out to the public hearing, support the plan, and provide any additional comments you want to at that time. So at this point, I'll let Jim do his short presentation, and then we will have a question and answer exchange. Okay.
Great, thanks, Joe. And I think I've seen everybody at our earlier meetings, right? So I don't have to rehash all the old stuff. I'm going to just flip through that pretty quickly and then spend more time kind of on how we got to this kind of this plan. So that's my goal. And so you all know about the importance of that sustainability plan, especially in feeding into this plan. You know, so we've built on that pretty well. And the outreach, there's probably some of your picture in there. So, but and then developing a kind of questionnaire that we reached out. We had 321 or 22 responses. I think one of them was maybe not fully responded to, so we did not count that one or not. But what we did learn out of that is that, you know, most of the use in here is really recreational oriented. You get some commuters and some people that come into Bowie. Not too many work here and ride a bike into Bowie, but some that work here and want to be able to get to other places for transportation purposes. But mostly it's recreational. Short trip opportunities is big. Everybody wanted to be able to, you know, ride or walk to a nearby shopping area or facility, and so that's really what the focus mostly is. The improvements we're suggesting will help commuters. I mean, that people are using it, but that isn't kind of what drove the decision making. The vision, you know, along those lines is really about taking all your individual little segments that you have, connecting them all together into a system so everybody can enjoy nice quality experiences riding a bike or walking or other wheeled types of things, as I'm sure we'll get to. I'm going to kind of go through these overall goals just and then as a way to kind of describe how we organized everything. So there were 6 goals. The first 2 I'll talk a little bit about is this network of trails that we worked pretty hard on. In that first workshop, you had the yarn, you know, and that was really helpful for us. And then at the second workshop, we kind of looked at the resulting maybe 3 of those. We kind of consolidated them into 3 and then tried to generate those. So it was really based at that first workshop. You gave us a lot of great input on what the problems and opportunities were, where it was challenging to get from one intersection to the other. So we kind of consolidated that and kind of used that as a basis for how well each of the alternatives overcame some of those barriers, or whether they're never going to be overcome, so some of them we kind of shied away from in moving forward. But certainly the biggest opportunity that you have, some of them are county opportunities like Racetrack Road, they're county roads. Some of them, we don't really know whether, like on Northview, you know, whether that should become a primary route for bicycles and pedestrians. That's certainly with the school there and the wide sidewalks, but for bicyclists, it's a little more challenging. And whether you could actually carve some more space for bicyclists out of there became pretty difficult to do. But certainly that as part of the network may just be the more secondary or part of the route. And then on 450 Annapolis Road, we did collect some crash data that the state was able to provide for us throughout all of Bowie, and it is probably the one that has the most, the most crashes along, and you wouldn't, probably no one would disagree with that data. Some bicycle, some pedestrian, both. And then looking at the network responsibility, the blue are the city streets, and the brighter green are the county roads, and then the state highways are the darker green. So we thought that through in thinking about this network as what could the city do to kind of improve the conditions. That's what you have most control over, versus what the county can do. They can be influenced, certainly, and then what the state can do, they're less flexible, really, in what they're able to do. So we tried to kind of get our thinking and organizing it in such a way that we would keep that in mind as we move forward. And then out of that, we had these three alternatives, whether it was a series of smaller loops within the city, whether it was a big loop all the way around the city, or whether it was a kind of a linear, what we call the Bowie Byway. And then we looked at these criteria mostly about connectivity and safety. How could we improve connectivity? How could we make safety, solve some of these safety issues, and then create sort of priorities out of that? So those were the criteria that we used for evaluating the network to see how we could get that working better for everybody. So in each one of those, you guys gave us some good feedback. We took the feedback that you gave us on each one. You filled out some of these forms. And then we kind of brought that more kind of qualitative information together, and then we also quantified it a little bit to see what each one had to offer. And looking, so alternative 2 is the greater Bowie loop, and 3 is the linear version, kind of came out on top. Both had goods, positive and negatives, and so within the measurable thing, just looking at it, the greater Bowie loop was longer, and it had connected more neighborhoods. It utilized more off-road trails that you already had. But at the same time, it kind of relied more on on-road facilities and required more new trail construction. Well, it's longer and it had more of all of those things. Whereas the more linear Bowie Byway connected almost as many neighborhoods, and it connected more parks. But at the same time, it took less advantage of some of those existing off-road trails. So those measurable aspects combined with the qualitative information that you gave us led us to start thinking, well, how could we combine probably those two and then fold in a couple little loops as well? So we're really kind of merging all three almost to some degree. And then if you were looking at your phone, somebody was telling me, each of the way we kind of laid all those out, the double white thick lines are the kind of main primary route. The narrower yellowish ones are the secondary. And then it shows on the inside of that whether it's an existing multi-use trail, an existing side path. It's on those alternatives, we mapped out the destinations that were accessed as part of those alternatives. And then you'll see proposed trails or connection opportunities are those black dashed lines. So within all that great information that we got, that we collected and used, we're able to kind of sort through this and kind of try to communicate it to you. And so when you were looking at your phone, you kind of had to really zoom in there. But so in the longer term, we looked at how to achieve that greater Bowie loop, and what we realized is that, oops, I know there's a, oops, uh-oh. somewhere there is a pointer on here. Volume, I know I did it once. Oh well, I'll try to, so the purple lines, let me go back. There we go. So you got a preview. So the purple lines really form that greater Bowie loop, but we learned is really it involves US 301 and Crane Highway. It involves Maryland 197 north of Annapolis Road. Both of those, I don't think anybody were really enthusiastic about traveling on, except if you were, could ride as fast as the cars, I guess. So. But that doesn't mean you should take those off. So what I'm thinking about, really, and what we want to recommend is that you keep those in your vision and say when Maryland or the federal government or whoever it makes those improvements and they're in that opportunity plan, they have that in the long-range plan, some of those improvements will be made. There's a lot of right-of-way along 301, some on 3, that you could really get a path along there. And you put it in your plan, you say, we want a path. And when they're ready to do it, you get it, you bring the plan out, say, build this, and advocate for it. And that'll get that in the long-range vision. But you yourselves as a city have less control over that. You really can't do much about it other than advocate for it. But put it in the plan, adopt it in, I think you're going to update your comp plan, put it in the comp plan, and get it everywhere you can. And then when they go to make those changes, it'll be done. So then we started focusing more on the sort of Bowie byway part of all that, the linear north-south route, and realizing that we could put that together. Sure wish I could get that pointer. I know it's on here somewhere. Maybe this is it.
Trigger button underneath. It's the trigger underneath.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. So you already have and are working on the Heritage Trail, and the county is working on it. So there's projects in the pipeline moving forward. You have Racetrack Road, which the southern part of that is in the pipeline under design. They're making improvements around the school area and things like that. The north part of Racetrack Road is really wide. If they do develop any development types of stuff happen around there, you want to be able to say this is what we want with bicycle and pedestrian activity there. So that is a really important piece of it. The intersection of 450 Annapolis Road there is really critical. It gets across to White Marsh Park, through the park and down along some existing on-road facilities, which are Stony Brook, a little piece of Bel Air, and Ken Hill. And those are, I'll talk a little bit about enhancing the on-road biking that you have now. That one's a little more challenging, but I'll get to it in a minute. It's got more driveways than the other one I'll talk about shortly. And then I think I got some more pictures here. Oops. And then that gets you across US 50 at the existing trail and crossing, and then goes through the government center. And it's kind of I blew that up in the plan, so if you're looking at your phone, you can actually see it. But those are all existing trails pretty much, and the intersections are pretty reasonable. And then there's a piece of Mitchellville Road, which is probably one of the bigger challenges in terms of making this work, in that the existing side paths, some of them are called, one's a side path, one's a sidewalk, but they look about the same width. And so this is one where you'd want to pick one side and widen it and get it bigger. Now it's a county road. So you have, again, that's where you're going to have to advocate for that to happen. But it seems like there's some grass growing over some of that asphalt. So the first thing I do is go out there with a shovel and see if I can see how much asphalt you can get on one side or the other. So the mapping says side path, but I'm not seeing it. Maybe you guys know better. And then it gets over to Mount Oak here, where there is an existing side path by the church there, and it ends. And then connecting, it's another county road there. You can either get on and use the shoulders or extend that side path would be ideal. Goes through Mount Oak Park and then down to Pin Oak Parkway. And that is a road that has a lot of shoulder area and no driveways. There's only one or two little sections that have many driveways. So what happens, and I'll show this shortly, is that when people want to park, even though they only park there once a year, they don't want to give up their parking area in front of their house when they have a driveway. So we need to be able to kind of have a strategy for working through that on those two sections, Pin Oak Parkway and then the one to the north up there at Ken Hill, Bel Air, and Stony Brook. So that one's the hard one. This one's a lot easier. Okay. There we go. Yeah, and so then looking at who your partners are in all of this, in the city sections, really, and Pin Oak Parkway, I think, is the one you can have the most effect immediately. The Collington branch, what I didn't mention is that all the little footprints that you see, oops, is a parallel system. See, now you can see the footprints better, of natural surface trails. And so we don't want to forget those natural surface trails. They took them out. Originally, they were in the Collington Stream Valley in earlier plans. They're no longer in there. I guess when they did their plan, they couldn't figure out, get enough information on if anybody really wanted those trails anymore, even though it's just a stream valley. But I think you should advocate for them. And I talked to the trail planner, Bob Patton, about it and said, you need to advocate for and put those back in. He said, sure, put them back. So that shouldn't be that hard to get them back in. And the same on the Patuxent River side. There we go. That's a lot of MNC PPC parkland. I think they're working on getting under the US 50 bridge there through, is it Melwood? Melwood is the other thing. And then back through to the stadium and stuff. So this whole piece of the system would be a great pedestrian network, and it would connect up to your neighborhood trails that are up in there. So those two big linear pieces are really great opportunities that we want to keep pushing forward and getting you to think about that. The other piece that's part of the system now are these three loops. There's one there, there's one there, and then there's a third here. So those loops are a way to kind of create short trip opportunities around the shopping centers, the parks, and other things. And those will become your secondary trails that are still in the plan, still important. Northview is part of that, but again, we're a little concerned about bicycle safety really on that road for most people. But walking is fantastic. You can go walk on the sidewalk for miles. And then in and around connecting the Government Center and Allen Pond Park, is really a key part of it. So we want to make it so people can walk, can ride a bike, and all of those. So those loops are really critical. And then the third one is up by White Marsh Park. Let me see if I can get that. Connecting up to the existing trail on the existing shared use path that's over there along where the school is in the park, Fox Hill Park. And then this is one, and then there's the third one right there. So those are key concepts. I'm sorry. All right, so the next part of the plan talks about the barriers, and we have the kind of route identified. Those are your best shots. We want to get those going forward. But then, how do you begin to remove some of those barriers, increase the connectivity more at a site scale? And so at our earlier meeting, we did talk about the changes and advances and practices for this kind of stuff. There's just a lot more. In the last 5 years, the technology has changed quite a bit, and people are much more willing. And you, the city of Bowie, can access these without having to go through the state highways, as long as you don't use that state or federal money to do some of these things. So you can go ahead and go and look at the NACTO Urban Bikeway Design Guide. They've got other guides that you just have to kind of show the warrant, the reason why. And the warrants have been hard to demonstrate because nobody will cross the street because it's too dangerous, but then there's not enough pedestrian activity to warrant. So you have to look at the destinations and justify that as a key goal. And then those traffic controls and signals, I know in Alexandria they just did this, and it's really helpful, is they give you the leading advance on pedestrians. So before people can go ahead and they'll make their right turn, and sometimes they also limit the right turn on red at the same place. It's a bad intersection, and you'll get the pedestrian get that little advanced lead into there, and that's really great. And then crossing, the mid-block or mid-road on arterials, installing some of these protective areas as well to get across on the longer crosswalks. And I think you just keep going and working towards and try to get one done in the most logical place. And I think then once you have one, then you continue to demonstrate that's, people will know more about it. And then, a little more advanced in this is kind of getting a bigger place for pedestrians, a more clear delineation for pedestrians in a lot of those intersections by making the road less visible. So that might be extending curbs, changing the texture of the parking areas, and really giving that pedestrian a stronger place, a more visible place. And kind of to the extreme where you have bike lanes through there. This is in Salt Lake City, and these are becoming much more prominent around. This was the first one, I think, that was built this way. But that that sorts out all the competing moves. I think I gave you a video location for that to show you how those things work. But again, using the visual cues of that bright green paint really gives a better picture for everybody going through a complicated intersection like that. So I think that's probably a little longer term from where you're going, but that would be important.
Like that one looks like they took out lanes on the outside. Is that what they normally do when they put in?
You see that there's a parking bulb out here. See parking? And so the bike lane is on the inside.
Is that bike
There's
lane
two
on the
lanes.
inside?
This is a cycle track.
That used to be part of the road?
Yeah, so the Salt Lake City, so if you've ever been there, they got plenty of space. But they're taking out that right lane. They reallocated some of the pavement in the street in this example. They've done other places where they haven't done that, but this particular intersection they did do that. So they have a left turn lane, a through lane, a parking lane, and then I believe this is a one-way cycle track there, and then sidewalk. And so, sorting out all of that through that intersection is a thing of beauty, and they get the signal timing to work with it. So it's, I think I put the video link in the report. I hope I did. It's really worth seeing the animation of it to see how it really works. And then another important thing, we talked about this before, was the traffic calming itself. And the key concepts in traffic calming is to kind of introduce slower speeds gradually. So you have a zone where the standard 35-mile-an-hour zone, you build some sort of island or some way where people have to deflect around it. You start to slow down in the middle, and you use visual friction here. I showed you those pictures of the Bel Air there where the big trees are, and when you look on the other side, it's like you could race through the other side. That's just an illustration, though. And then once you get into sort of the 25-mile-an-hour zone, you begin to neck down and choke down certain places. A lot of times in the past, bicyclists have been very concerned about traffic calming because it takes up space where bicyclists can go. But here's an example of again, that cycle. It becomes kind of like a little protected cycle track for the bicyclist as part of that, as it necks down in that whole area. And so those kinds of features put in repetitive way, say along Northview, for example, would be the way to slow that traffic down. I think there's only a few more of these, if I can make it go. Okay. Another concept I think that you talked a lot about before was this the notion of being able to go into the Bowie Town Center or other place or other destination, being able to park your bike and have sort of features that are comfort level that make people encourage them to say, oh, I could ride my bike there. I have a place to put the bike. If I need a drink of water, I could get it. So I call these kind of urban trailheads, and they're a little different than the one on WB&A Trail, which is a parking lot in a grassy area and a big sign. So these are really working with your businesses to kind of create bicycle-friendly businesses. And then this certified trail friendly really was done for the Great Allegheny Passage. They had a trail town program. But I think the concept really works. I think if you think about people wanting to ride their bike at a smaller scale into town instead of driving, those short trip opportunities. And if people know that there are bicycle-friendly or pedestrian-friendly businesses, and you give them a kind of whole certification program or Chamber of Commerce, like I call it the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval, if you remember that. Then that helps those businesses, they can begin to market and promote that. And then it might involve parking, it might involve water. If they're restaurants, they might have outdoor seating for people that are enthusiastically been riding or walking. Other ways that you can treat people with respect as they ride or walk into their business. And I showed these signs at the earlier meeting about the different sort of elements of wayfinding, realizing that most of your state highway roads will have to use something to this effect. These green signs with the little fingerboards that they're able to use now. And that places like Davis, California, which has like probably more bicycles than cars, have bigger signs that color coordinate their areas, their distinct geographies, and they have this bike loop at the bottom. So that bike loop could kind of end up being up there as part of it. And then I just had a conversation with the Prince George's Trails coordinator, and I think they're going to use more of these fingerboard type wayfinding signs on their trails. So it may be that we look into try to coordinate it, since most of the system is really either your local streets or the county roads, that you look at these fingerboards as kind of the way to get that. And you could probably still color code them or find a way to kind of label the Bowie Byway or whatever name you can come up with for your main trail facility, your trail spine. But that system is probably going to work better in thinking through coordinating with the county. And the state probably would go for something like that. They could just become green, when they get to the state highway. I think that's it. Okay, and then last two here on the increasing confidence. Of course, in Seattle, you have everything there. But these are traffic gardens. You begin, and I think you could use one here to help people of this size to learn to ride on those bike lanes and through complicated intersections. They have more roundabouts and stuff there, but it's just a big kind of street system and crosswalks and different things that you configure, and it's like a playground. They go out with their little bikes, they learn to ride a bike, they learn about all those features in there. And they were done many years ago. They used to do a lot more of these, and they've had a resurgence. People love these. So I'm sure you could get one of these funded, just probably with the health center. Somebody, or
It's just like the ride around fun.
it's a playground. Yeah, they love it. It's a fun thing, and I love your signs. So all right, so I think in trying to communicate to people that Bowie is a bicycle-friendly place. That you're teaching people of all ages to ride a bike. You could have a similar one. WABA has a great program many of you may be familiar with that is really about teaching people even my age or to ride again. So and so those two things at both ends of the spectrum will increase the confidence level throughout. And then funding and volunteering. I come back to this last one here on prescriptions for parks. You're familiar with this program, but gosh, we just completed this project. I was really enjoying a boardwalk out in Prince William County, south of Woodbridge. And I'm walking out there, and you couldn't never walk anywhere in that area. And this gentleman comes up to me. I went out early one morning, and he says, this is better than aspirin. I'm sitting there going, my migraines have gone away. I'm going to come out here every morning. So I keep thinking of that, and I think people do benefit from safe access to a kind of connected, well-connected system of trails. And I think that's where your funding really and coordination and volunteer work that might come out of this really comes from that basic fundamental thing about people who do want to exercise, they do want to get spiritually enriched or excited again, and really get the blood going, So it's better than aspirin, as they say. So I think that's the last one. Yeah. So what I would like to do is just take any questions. I know that was longer than 15 minutes, Joe, but
Okay.
I did have a lot of...
If some of you may have come in late, we have a sign-in sheet back there for you to sign. But as I explained at the beginning, what we want to do is answer your questions that you might have about the plan. And if we can't get answers today,
Come back,
we will try to get answers back to you.
And in terms of the timing of the plan, September 3rd is the scheduled hearing, but if you want to get comments to us in the next, I don't know, month, whatever we want to take, but if you give us the month of August to come back and incorporate anything that you have that needs to be addressed, we can show how we would respond to that and put it in the plan.
So, does anyone have any questions? Well, just raise your hand. We'll try to respond. Dustin, you want to go first?
Yeah, I was wondering are we still at the point where we can add segments to the end of the trail plan?
Yeah, I think you can suggest things that you think are important, and I think between now and the public hearing date, we'll take whatever input we get and try to see if it'll affect the draft plan. And for the council meeting, we'll probably have a public hearing draft, which may be slightly different than this, but hopefully be very much like it. So there's an opportunity if you're critiquing this, and I've asked our own internal project team from city staff to critique the plan, the draft plan, and then give us their feedback. So there's always opportunities to bring stuff up.
And one suggestion was just behind the Bowie golf course where it connects to the WB&A trail. I remember looking into who owns the property. It's all city of Bowie behind the Bowie, the golf course, and then it comes down and you could connect down to the trail on 197, maybe just have a north-south.
Yeah, I've looked at that area behind the golf course, and the topography is a real challenge.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, let's get some other questions.
Well, I was kind of thinking along a similar line. Okay, what's flashing through my mind are times I've been up in Howard County on the trails that lead up towards Columbia and so forth, or out in Anne Arundel County along the rail spur, okay, where they've actually worked to sort of reclaim portions of land that just was not developed, keep people away from the roads as much as possible, rather than trying to mitigate traffic issues, crossing roads, and things of that nature. They sort of loop around to bypass these known problems, and they only use the roads when absolutely necessary. B&O trail, it's only when it's absolutely necessary to cross the road, you cross the road, and then the rest, for the next half mile, you don't see the road. But you're close to it,
Right.
but they're along the trail spur. And they've had some small businesses that have grown up alongside that have little cafes and things like that, bagel places. And it's sort of integrating itself, where the businesses have come to where there's an opportunity. The bicycle shop along one, for example. But just that thought, instead of trying to figure out how we're going to mitigate with all these driveways and combination of pedestrian traffic and bicycle traffic and crazy drivers driving not 25 miles an hour on a 25-mile-an-hour street.
Yeah, so you do have the WB&A trail that does that. I mean, and
Right
you
up
have-
here we have B&A, which is a piece of this, yeah.
Yeah, so what I guess we found is that there isn't many other opportunities out there to kind of get that. We looked at that section,
So I know, like through Somerset Park, for example, I know that there's an asphalt pathway through there.
yeah, so these were the natural surface trails all up and down the Collington branch. We looked at that, said, could there be an opportunity to do that? And the county determined through their park plan, they would not like to put an asphalt trail through there. It would be considered a natural surface trail. So I think some of that, I think we can get in that stream valley.
Could it be crushed stone?
And so they don't regulate, the county does not regulate whether bicycles use those trails. In other words, so you could build single track trails suitable for mountain bicycles through there. And they would not, I mean, they don't really,
Like CNO,
yeah.
told that.
Yeah.
John, you got a question?
Yeah, just wanted to go through the logic of why you chose some of the routes you did. I think I understand, but let me ask. So the section that runs along city streets from Stony Brook to Ken Hill Drive, that's going to be an on-road section. It seems like an alternate choice would have been just to go go down an existing off-road trail along 450 and then 197. So why did you pick an
We still have
on-road?
that as a loop. In other words, there's,
Correct.
so this becomes a loop. We wanted to be able to increase the connectivity between all those neighborhoods and the shopping and commercial areas that are up there. So it's kind of a direct, short trip opportunity to make it one route, pick one route that bicycles would have essentially a bigger presence. And that was the logic there.
So the fact that those others were state roads and you wouldn't have much control over those trails, is that also a part of your thinking?
Yeah, and then the amount of accidents were crashes, I guess, not accidents, all of them, but on Maryland 450 makes it hard to get across the street in a safe manner. So we were shying away, I guess, from encouraging, keeping in the existing trails that are there, but do you have an opportunity as city residents to invest in those trails, in those crossings? Is that something you can influence?
So they're still part of the secondary
Yeah.
network. They're mapped and they're still
Yeah,
part of would be part of the
But I'm
network.
just sort of curious that you were basically not using off-road trails that were already there and going for on-road trails that you're going to have to create along those roadways.
So those still exist, they still become, so the question is, what is your priority, what do you want to invest in? And what does the city have an ability to essentially affect? So, yeah.
I personally prefer that street to the 450 trail because there's so many crossings
Driveways,
and
crossings.
encroachment from cars that I prefer the being on the street and more visible.
Less traffic,
And
there's
less
still
traffic.
driveways, but the speed is slower
On the
theoretically.
450 trail, I feel invisible to the cars. They're not looking for the people who are going to cross their path as they turn right or left.
I think that's all, I guess, in terms of the logic, that's all. But we want to we don't want to get rid of those, they exist, and, but
It would be good something to figure out how to improve that trail along
Yes.
450 when
Yeah.
the state tries to.
Yes.
So again, we try to keep the things in your plan that when the state does those changes there, you can say, you can point to your plan, this is part of our loop around. And those loops are important.
John, did you have a follow-up?
So the other logic, I guess, I wanted is but the section after you cross the bridge over 50 and you go on this convoluted section that goes on East Haven and
Where the red arrow is, I think.
whatever to get over to Mitchellville Road. So why didn't you pick the bridge that now goes over 197 and just go down Northview Drive
So that's, again,
instead?
that's a good question, and that's part of this, that's one of the loops. So
Right.
same
Right, I
thing.
mean, you have that as an
So our
alternate.
concern was on Northview Drive. Would you be able to solve that for the most widest range of uses? And I guess even though you have some money in the capital improvement program
Yeah,
budget for
there's
making
a
some
5
fixes,
yeah.
it just is not, I don't see that would make it any safer or, slow the traffic down. I think you got some traffic calming, I think it's part of that. But you really need to get more space, for a multi-use trail. And you have the trails on these other sections that are existing. It's a kind of a slalom course, but I guess we saw that as an advantage. But at the same time, not losing sight that this is also that part of that loop system. So you would have the main spine and then loops that come off and serve the parks and neighborhoods that are around it.
Has there been traffic count studies done on Northview?
Not that I'm aware of.
We know that the traffic moves fast. I'm just not sure how thick it is at most times of day. 'Cause, you know, maybe it could have a road diet.
Yeah, yeah, so that would be something, I think you have the money for some improvements on Northview. So that would be,
So,
you know, we can definitely include a statement in here. I think maybe a good way to do it is to include a statement saying Northview is a logical extension if these improvements can be
Yeah.
made. And then you might want to
Yeah.
switch it over.
given that it's full city, so you have
Yeah.
more options. I always have, yeah, one of my problems with the Northview Trail is that it crosses Northview multiple times, which is problematic. And I don't like riding even on side path trails against traffic, because if I'm riding with traffic, I can see left turners. If I'm riding the other way, I can't see
Yeah,
left
that's a big
turners.
one. And the right turn on riders,
Yeah.
that are looking the other way
Yep,
when you're coming up.
yep.
Joshua, you have a question?
So I had a question about the pedestrian-only paths. And you kind of, I think you might have answered this a few minutes ago, because the question was, what type of surface would these paths have? I didn't see that information in the plan. I think it might be helpful just to talk about the different types of surfaces that a
We can-
pedestrian-only path does have. Yeah, because I did see, something about the natural surface trail, and I figured that might be pedestrian only, but then I saw mention of, mountain bikes and, equestrian, so I think it might be helpful just to put, a statement regarding, what a natural pedestrian path could
And
look like.
I had it in there and it wasn't well written, so we took it out, but I'm gonna spend more time writing. It was hard to kind of jump into that level. What I can do is make a sidebar or some way to kind of incorporate it. Yeah, that's a good point, thank you. Yeah, and I think, they could be, just stone does, they could just be dirt trails, that are single track, that are really geared toward, not sort of a natural condition. But that doesn't prohibit a mountain bike from using it.
So one of the issues with the city is its basic shape and layout. It's not like this nicely sized thing that you can easily design routes through. We're almost dependent upon, really to the west, the communities there to connect anything. So this may be outside the scope of what you've been given to, I suspect it is, but did you see any good opportunities to connect to trails and networks just to the west of us that, we should really think about? Even if we can't enact it, that's something we could advocate for, that would increase the interconnected with us in the outside world.
Yeah. So the east to west ones are the WB&A, and then is the main one. And then the north to south ones, the county is working hard on this Collington's Stream Valley, Collington Branch Stream Valley. And the route north to south, they go Upper Marlboro up to just north of Bowie there. So those two are the really important ones. And then we did look at the power line corridor, and then with Bob Patton at the county, and realized that unfortunately when it crosses a road, it puts you in a difficult place. So you have a lot of mid-block crossings. And then when you look at the conditions, like just go on to the county's GIS mapping and see how many steep slopes and wetlands there are, it becomes even more of a challenge to do that. So the question becomes, do you want to work with that power line as an opportunity? We had it originally as one of our, earlier alternatives, and we ended up deciding that there were so many challenges with it that it would be tough to kind of do much with it. Church Road, I think you just had an accident, crash.
Right, and if the county ever did come along and do what the city of Bowie wants, which is to improve Church Road from one end to the other, they would provide an off-road side path, and that would provide continuous north-south access.
Yeah,
You also have
one of the ones I was thinking of.
the 450 trail that runs east-west, and then along Mount Oak Road, actually, the county owns, Park and Planning owns land on both sides as you get west of the railroad tracks, and they could easily, on their own property, create an east-west trail. So if the Church Road system was there, then you would have a lot of good reasons to go and make those connections to the west.
The Patuxent River Valley, the county is looking at getting under that bridge there. It's a private owner. They're working hard on that. So that could open up quite a lot of experiences we can get under 50. There is an ordinance that, right here, where this goes under 50, there's actually a homeowner trail or a homeowner provision for a trail on one side of that railroad on the east side. So, wow, okay. So you could get through some of these barriers in those places. And I think between getting Church Road, the underpass there where the railroad goes by, and under 50 at the Patuxent River, those three would really be great north-south connectivity.
Do you, in your opinion or experience, do you see any place for that in our master plan, or is really that outside and should be worked elsewhere?
I think you can advocate for it, and if it would help to advocate for, then we can put. I would say adding in some context. Assumptions about helpful routes that are outside the city would be something we could put into this plan.
And one of the things we've tried to get Park and Planning interested in is constructing something in the old A44 right-of-way, which is the old intercounty connector. It's between Church Road and the railroad tracks. It's land that's been reserved by developers and given to Park and Planning or given to the county for this future road project. And the road project is never going to happen. And so we've talked to Park and Planning about taking the lead because that's outside the city limits mostly. But there's a swath of land that's probably 100 feet wide where you could really offset the trail and not really impact any neighborhoods and have it meander through that entire thing. And that would take you from almost Central Avenue all the way up north of Mount Oak Road. Yeah. So if you can't get Church Road done, this might even be more of an opportunity. But it would be Park and Planning that would have to take the lead on it.
Yeah, well, but that's exact example of project I'm thinking of.
And we've
I just don't know whether it belongs in our plan or somewhere else.
Yeah, I think some reference to it. That's
I think we can just maybe make a north-south corridors of interest, of strong interest.
But the city has made this comment about the project I'm speaking of every year when we do our annual transportation list to the county council. So it's already on that radar screen, but I think a reference in the plan is a really good addition.
Great idea.
Park and Planning will be doing the Bowie area master plan soon.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
So that would be the place to get those in that plan.
Absolutely. So it's good that our plan would reflect something like that as well.
You get this plan, you just get them to reference it directly, right? Hopefully they can do that.
Anybody else? Sir?
So let me ask about a couple of slides. I noticed there, this one says long-term vision. I think the next one you had said like near-term and short-term.
Yeah.
So in terms of next steps in what's presented in September, what exactly is being presented to the council? Is it a plan with a schedule for, or on long-term and near-term, are there dates? Can you talk a little bit more about what's going to happen?
Sure. So I guess in thinking about the long-term vision, it's really important to keep these in there. I think we spoke about that earlier, but the three pieces that keep you from creating basically a second north-south that would give you that nice loop are on state highways. So it's 301 Crane Highway and the northern section of 197. You have you've seen, I think how many years you've been asking for these improvements. So keep asking, and I think at some point those roads are going to be improved and then you will get your, so we're assuming that would happen at some point in the future, but don't, just keep asking. You don't have any control over it. So that's the long term. And then everything else is essentially, focusing on those pieces that don't have those roads in it. You'll notice, let me go back again. Because that loop also includes, that greater Bowie loop then would include that piece of 197 where the trail is. So those parts of it get kind of folded in the long term. But what you're going to try to do then is get this north-south route as the top priority. Work on that. And then hopefully the rest of that loop will show up at some point in the future, if that makes sense. I think did I answer your question?
Yeah, obviously long-term you know, there's some things that are contingent upon other things happening.
They have less control.
Is the short and near-term stuff things that the city, more the things that
Yes.
the city can control? Okay.
Especially-
So in that September, when it's presented to the council, are we asking them to sort of like adopt and say, support the overall, you know, greater Bowie loop or whatever? Is this sort of like, here's our blueprint that we want to adopt and make progress on?
Yes, this is the strategy or the formula that we want to follow in future actions. And we're definitely committed to working with the Trails group, the MAPS Trails group, to try to sort out all of the subsequent actions that have to take place, and working through my office, the planning department primarily, but we'll have Public Works involved. They're taking a greater interest in these things. So, you know, we really needed to go through this exercise of getting a plan, not only to update our old plan, but really to point us in the direction we think the residents want us to go. So it's a strategy development. And we would appreciate any, you know, I think it's going to look pretty much as what you see in the draft, what we give to the council. And we would want you to come out and support, you know, the direction that we're heading. And between now and then, if you think there's anything we're not covering, or if there's a problem with something that's in that, let us know and we'll try to refine.
So right now I have adding in those in some way, shape, or form, the outside the city, north, south, and east-west connections that Joe was mentioning. And then I also have, want to be sure to reference these secondary loops like Northview that are part of the system. They're important to have, and I think we need to kind of bolster that language up a little bit.
And then
The types of surfaces
So, yeah.
on the natural surface trail. So we have those three things we're definitely going to add, you know, and then we, like any comments that you have in the next few weeks, if you can get them to us, we can try to respond in a similar way.
Okay, Dustin?
The very north loop, the very top east corner, does that go up into the Federal Reserve area? And what is the probability of that actually happening?
This is your plan for the Bowie Heritage Loop, and then this is the new bridge crossing.
Okay.
So you're going to be up there. So this last piece is a county priority right there. So I think that gets to the Mark Station, and then
Oh, so that comes down through, like, near the power lines, kind of, and then over down to Mark Station? That's not, it's on this side of the railroad tracks, right? It doesn't go onto the other side of the railroad tracks.
Looks like it hit Bowie State campus, is that correct?
yes. Yeah, so that is all from the county. A lot of that is in the county plan. It's on your Bowie Heritage Trail map. The purple line is all part of that Bowie Heritage Trail. This piece is from the county plan.
And it's all south of the Amtrak line, right?
Well, actually, it goes north to Jericho Park, and then it comes down along 197 by the Goodloe House across from Bowie State University, and would cross under Maryland 197 at the Mark Station. And then you'd have to go under the tunnel, under the tracks, to get to the other side.
But again, that's the county, you know, in the county plan. So we want to be sure we reflect that as a good thing. So that's another example, you know, something outside, because you're about to, you expressed it well when you said the boundary is so wacky, you know, but you can't help but to have these sort of inter-jurisdictional issues. Good questions.
Okay, anyone else?
Just want to say, great job, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a great step forward, a lot of work. I'm impressed, yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it really does have a lot of wealth of information in it. So.
Some of the information in chapter 6 about complete streets and that I thought would be very useful in the future as well.
Do we know when the complete streets is going to be hitting the street?
The complete streets will come after this, isn't that right?
Right, we're trying to just do it in a parallel process so that we didn't put one in front of the other. The plan, I think, lays the case or makes the case for complete streets. The resolutions and things that have been drafted, we're already kind of working those through the city attorney and the Public Works Department. So we're ready to go, but we want to put this thing in place first, put the plan in place, and then have the resolution come shortly after that.
So would that be the same hearing, do you think, or like slightly staggered.
probably the following meeting or something like that, because this plan, the council holds a hearing, and then we would bring the plan back to them for their adoption on an agenda through a resolution, because the resolutions are policies. So they'll reference the document and approve it by resolution. So probably the second meeting in September, we'll have it on, assuming there aren't any big changes we have to make from the public hearing. Hopefully the council's going to like this plan, but we can bring the complete streets thing forward at that time and get it all wrapped up.
I just want to say that the input you guys gave is fantastic. You don't get too much of an opportunity to have such a back and forth, so it's really was helpful and much appreciated as well.
Okay. Well, if we're out of questions, thank you very much for coming, and we appreciate your time and your interest, and keep communicating with us. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
See, I want to see this thing big.
Like that.